And there's fantastic stuff in Ukraine. Like there's a company called First Contact that makes long-range drones, Deep Strike, that took the flag off the Kremlin. Ukraine could have been having long-range attacks on Russia every day, but the government has in fact backed its own companies, put them out of business, brought in prosecution. This is just the tip of the iceberg on this. They've used the state to persecute political opponents and economic competitors. That's the thing. So I've always argued, and I argue to you now, that we have to get a grip on this, build our relationship with the military and industry, and as much as possible avoid the Ukrainian government.
Now let's get some more reaction to the corruption scandal in Ukraine that's threatened to jeopardise negotiations with the US over the ending of the war with Russia. President Zelensky's chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, resigned after his home was raided by anti-corruption officers. Earlier, the Times special correspondent Anthony Lloyd spoke to us from Ukraine.
Well, that's going to have a huge immediate impact because, first of all, it's very fair to say that Andriy Yermak's presence and power as Zelensky's chief of staff kind of defines Zelensky's era, and his absence is going to define what happens next.
Well, let's talk now to Lord Glasman, the Labour peer who's become a key behind-the-scenes advocate of closer military ties between Britain and Ukraine. Good morning, and thank you so much for coming in.
Good morning.
What did you make of those scenes that were probably unravelling around 24 hours ago of those anti-corruption officers going into Zelensky's chief of staff's home?
Well, this has been building. So that anti-corruption agency is called NABU, and they've been having wiretaps on Yermak's flat for, I'm told, about 2 to 3 months. So they've accumulated this information. The people, my sources in Ukraine tell me that this information was actually known by Zelensky a month ago, but Yermak somehow persuaded him that they weren't true or something along those lines. Now, Yermak is a key ally of Zelensky, but what I'm saying to you is that the president has been using his office for systematic self-enrichment and aggrandizement. That's been going on a while. It's been very difficult to talk about it here because people have such a... I was on with Guito Harry and he was saying, but he's one of the great leaders of our time. Well, no, the Ukrainian people are the heroes of our time, but the government increasingly is an impediment to the effective prosecution of the war. I think it's that bad.
And if it's that serious, what are the implications for the war? I mean, people will listen to this thinking we are giving a huge amount of financial backing to Ukraine, as are other Western nations. Is there a danger that when there are whiffs of corruption, and that's all it is at the moment, that nothing is proven, that could have a detrimental effect on people saying, well, why should we give money?
Well, this is my argument. We should have been much tougher with the Ukrainian government since the beginning. I completely understand at the beginning Boris Johnson just, and that was a wonderful thing that we did. It's key for our national interest. Now, Ukraine has industry of an extraordinary kind. They have drone production, ballistic missile production, engine production, satellite production. I want to see Ukraine as the key partner to the UK, but we can't be if it's not just the stealing, there's the sabotage of competition. So, for example, there's a company called Firepoint, which has the majority of the ballistic missile and drone market. Now, that is Zelensky's ex-TV casting company that morphed itself. And there's fantastic stuff in Ukraine. Like there's a company called First Contact that makes long-range drones, Deep Strike, that took the flag off the Kremlin. Ukraine could have been having long-range attacks on Russia every day, but the government has in fact backed its own companies, put them out of business, brought in prosecution. This is just the tip of the iceberg on this. They've used the state to persecute political opponents and economic competitors. That's the thing. So I've always argued, and I argue to you now, that we have to get a grip on this, build our relationship with the military and industry, and as much as possible avoid the Ukrainian government.
So how do we get that grip? What should the government be doing?
Well, we are actually funding the anti-corruption agencies that have been part of this. So I say, I've been talking to Norway and Sweden about this. They're very much in favour of having an international committee that takes control of the Justice Department, because as it stands, the government is using its position to effectively sabotage the best parts of the military and industry.
This all feeds Russia's narrative, doesn't it? This all helps Russia in its it's always said that Zelensky shouldn't be the leader of Ukraine. They want a peace deal. And, there have even been suggestions they won't sign anything unless Zelensky goes. How problematic is that for Ukraine?
Well, the existence of Russia and President Putin is in itself, in your language, problematic. But the thing is, unless Ukraine can get straight, there's incredible brilliance in its industrial engineering. I can't describe to you their gift. It's like Luke Littler at DART. They can make drones overnight in a basement with a 3D printer, and they're extraordinary. They can make space satellites, all of this, except the government is corrupting and extracting it. So up until now, it's been very difficult to make this argument because people say, well, you're just pro-Putin. No, I'm quite fanatically pro-Ukraine, but we have to insist on changes inside the Ukrainian government, particularly if we're going to build our industrial strategy on military production, and Ukraine's such a key partner. So bilateral relationships with industry, bilateral relationships with the military, without going through the detour of the government, is the way I would suggest.
Are you suggesting that this potential could be the beginning of the end for Zelensky as leading Ukraine? Because some people will say that is once again falling into the Russian hands. It's everything Russia wants.
Look, we've got the ex-head of the army, Zaluzhny, is in London as the ambassador. He's a really clean person. He's a very good person. It's overdue for an election. What I'm saying is, it's not pro-Putin to tell the truth that this president has actually been running a very corrupt regime. I mean, this company, Firepoint, as I say, is his ex-production company, and he's just eliminated the competition. So we've got to look at Zelensky now. He really has to go.
Is it feasible for any kind of election, though, during a war? I mean, that's what Zelensky's always said. And is it realistic? So many displaced people. How can you have an election?
Well, we had an election in 1945, with the troops abroad, with all of this. It's always possible to have. Now, he's been using that argument to avoid an election. It's long overdue. But right now, Ukraine has to actually reconstitute its government as well as defend its nation. And that's just the reality it's in.
Do you worry that the peace negotiations are now going to be severely stalled? Because Zelensky's chief of staff was very central to those negotiations. I mean, he was quite, I don't know if close is the right word, but he was working closely with the US to try and get something that was a more pro-Ukrainian deal. How significant is it that he is now completely out of the picture?
Well, I think in the long run it's going to help this process, because if there can be a new government or certainly a very big change, then there's less of these corrupt interests around, and they can concentrate. I mean, the United States is pretty much slanted towards Russia on this. I mean, effectively, they're saying you've got to give them Crimea, you've got to give them the Donbass. The crucial thing is Ukraine can come out of this as the largest country in all of Europe, even with those land concessions, with the most effective military, with its industrial base, with its agriculture. I see, if they can be more democratic and accountable, that Ukraine can be a wonderful partner to us and flourish as a democracy. That's the key, and that's possible within this frame.
I want to ask quickly before we go, front page of the paper today, lots of people talking about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, misleading the public. Do you have concerns about trust in the Chancellor, trust in the government at the moment?
I think it's impossible to be a sentient human being and not worry about the levels of trust at the moment in the government. That's just the reality we're in, and the restoration of trust. I think the really bright spark here is Shabana Mahmood, who is actually, I think, building trust with the people in following through. I saw today that she's cancelled taxes for asylum seekers. She seems to be, and John Healey is a very trustworthy person at defence, and he's been looking at this situation now for 2 years. I mean, it's very real.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much for coming in. Grateful to you for your time.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. That is Lord Glasman, the Labour peer, speaking to us there about, well, the real challenges in Ukraine at the moment. And obviously we'll keep right across any updates we have on those anti-corruption investigations, and President Zelensky's chief of staff, of course, being, essentially having to resign because if he didn't go, he was going to be pushed, it looked like.
It can feel